October 16th will please come to order. Adequate notice of this meeting as required by the Open Public Meeting Act has been that on January 19th, 2024, a copy of the notice specifying the date, time, and location was posted on the bulletin board outside of Borough Hall, given to the clerk administrator, mail, fax, or email to the Courier News, and posted on the Borough website. If any member believes that this meeting is being held in violation of the Open Public Meeting Act, please state your views at this time. Hearing none, next item. Roll call, I'm sorry. These proceedings are of a judicial nature. Only those items on the agenda will be discussed. Proper judicial decorum must and will be maintained. Next item, roll call, please.
Chairman Adair. Mr. Allat.
Here.
Ms. Carpenitz.
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin is excused this evening. Mr. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Vidinsky.
Here.
Mr. Flores is excused this evening. Mr. Alvarez.
Here.
Mr. Daniels.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Next item, pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please remain standing while we observe a moment of silence on the passing of Bernie Novato, or longtime planning board chairperson? Bernie was a friend. He spent 35 years as the chairman of the planning board. I think he took over from Rich Cobb back in the 80s. He was also the chairman of the Somerville County Planning Board. He was a visionary. We didn't always agree, but we were always able to walk away from the table with a consensus and friendship. We did develop a friendship over the years. He's going to be missed. I've been doing with this for about 49 years, not just on this board, but when I was on Borough Council. And I've gotten to know and work with some of the great visionaries of this town, like George Shea, Mike Kerwin, Rick St. Pierre, Bernie Novato, and he's with the best of them. His vision for this town was a positive one, and we didn't always agree on that. But we were always able to shake hands and say, okay, this is what's best for the town. I miss him. I visit his grave every day now, get a chance to talk with him. We're going to continue doing the fine work that he started. Thank you. Next item, resolutions. The Sunoco Station.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution on offer this evening is for Sunoco LLC, which we adjudicated at the last meeting on September 18th. As you know, we approved what were really sign revisions that essentially reduced the sign. It's the most unusual resolution because it's a D2, a 40:55D-2. They call it, technically under the statutes, it's a expansion of a non-conforming use. That statute is also applicable to a modification, that it doesn't necessarily intensify the use, and the law is fairly well clear in that regard. So that's why the resolution says expansion/modification, because this is a modification. We indicated, we were in favor of the changes. There were also some other issues that the board addressed, namely the condition of the property, which we identified as essentially unkempt, and the location of a badly needed handicap space, and also the repair or relocation or replacement of the guardrail at the corner of the property. So we put all that together. Earlier this afternoon, I made one final detailed change that had been requested by the board and by Mr. Cowley, the attorney for the applicant, and I think we're all set to go.
Okay, someone like to move the resolution?
I'll move it. I'll second.
Second, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Chairman Adair.
Yes.
Mr. Allat.
Yes.
Ms. Carpenitz.
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill.
Yes.
Mr. Vidinsky.
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Daniels.
I choose to abstain.
So-
Next item, application, Bell Avenue. Well, they're not gonna be heard tonight.
I don't know what the reasoning was. I mean, I know that I had spoken with, I know a couple of members were not gonna be able to make it tonight, so maybe this is a blessing in disguise, but, the applicant, was aware, I think that, you know, it was reviewed Mr. Cole's report, and I think it believed it needed to, you know, further examine its plans and certainly what it was proposing. It was gonna discuss a move of the application to the November meeting, and then requested a December move. I had some hesitation with this, and ultimately, before I had a chance to really say, you know, rather than notice it now and start it tonight, what they're gonna do is they're gonna do new notice, and we expect that it'll be commenced on December 4th. December 4th, is that our,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's right, we always have an early December meeting, that's right,
Yeah,
'cause-
November and December,
Mhm.
usually,
okay.
those are the holidays.
So at this point, there's really no, I'm not gonna announce notice because the applicant will renotice and, republish and remail.
And should the proposed plans change, I will revise the report.
Right.
I did a draft just so the board knows, a week or two before the board got it, to give the applicant time to review it. And I told the applicant that I had to finalize it by Friday. As the board knows, I typically get it on Wednesday. But I wanted to incorporate any changes or any nuances into the finalized. There were no changes, so I just literally took it from draft to finalized. And I got some comments back from Rich regarding some numbering, which will be addressed in the next version. But that's why it went out on Friday. Typically, the board gets it on a Wednesday, Thursday.
I will notify our special counsel on the litigation that the meeting has been moved. I mean, you know, it shouldn't be a big problem, though the court has been wondering where this was. And then finding out it was on our calendar, I think, was satisfied with that. So just the fact that it's gonna move 60 days or so, I don't think is going to be a problem.
Okay. So, you wanna talk about, real quick? Well, we voted on that, right?
Performance bonds?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because Mike and I had a discussion a couple weeks ago about that. There was some question on it. There
Well-
was some question on the calculations of it.
Under the MLUL, you know, an applicant is obliged, it's required to post what's called both performance and what are called maintenance bonds. The performance bond is substantially usually posted for the value of the improvements at the property. In some cases, a percentage thereof, but generally for the value of the improvements at the property, and is usually secured from a reputable, and I say reputable because there are some not so reputable bonding companies in this state. I know because I've litigated against them. But the bonding company will prepare what's called a performance bond, which is something akin to like a guarantee or a mortgage or something to that effect, which essentially secures the value of the improvements. So as the applicant, let's say that you're doing a subdivision and you've got to do, in addition to the, you know, for public improvements, you got to do curbs and sidewalks and different coats or you know, of asphalt. Okay, you generally will bond for those, bond for those improvements. Sometimes there are other improvements to be bonded for. In many cases, in some cases, it might be landscaping, though generally trees and things like that are generally the subject of the maintenance bond, which kind of comes later. So I'll focus in on the performance bond. But the performance bond is a security, which works to the benefit of the municipality and against the applicant. because the applicant has to post substantial monies to get the bond. And what happens is the engineer, in order to determine what the value of the bond should be, the engineer, no one else really, the engineer reviews the application, reviews the improvements that need to be made. And Michael, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong, but generally the engineer will review what needs to be done and will prepare a letter which indicates the amount of improvements that must be bonded. That is provided to, now, some towns do it differently. I know as the municipal attorney in Monroe, I used to approve all those letters. Some board attorneys do it. But anyway, the letter is prepared, it's provided to the applicant provides it to the bonding company, and the bonding company issues a bond at the cost to the developer. Now, as each, the intention is that as each of these common improvements are constructed and completed, the amount of the bond can be reduced. And the applicant would get the approval from the engineer and provide that information to the municipality, and the governing body generally will have to do a resolution to reduce the performance bond by, let's say, okay, you've built your sidewalks, so that takes X amount of dollars off the amount due. Now, how do you set the amounts due? It generally is based upon the cost of the improvements. There are sometimes instances where ancillary costs are added in, as they should be, because there's, as in the military, they sometimes say cost plus, because it's not just the amount of the concrete, it's the amount of the manpower and other related expenses. And that's why there's generally those are pretty liberally construed. And performance bonds should be reduced with great care. When I say great care, I mean not recklessly or arbitrarily. Basically, a bond is reduced when the request is made for the bond reduction by the developer. The referral will go to the municipal engineer and the municipal attorney. If the municipal engineer believes it is appropriate for the bond to be reduced, really that's his or her legal authority. And at that point, the municipality can, by resolution, reduce the bond. Excuse me, sorry. At that point, as I said, at that point the bond is reduced, but the remaining bond remains in the hands, as reduced, remains in the hands of the municipality. The bond is not retired until everything is done and the engineer has determined that all the improvements have been made and related costs have been taken care of, and that related work has been finished. I mean, you could be, there could be, if let's say, let's go back to our sidewalks. Let's say the sidewalks are not done properly, and the engineer can't really approve at that point the bond reduction. The engineer will do a letter indicating that I don't mean indicating that the sidewalks are not properly built. Certain items need to be done before they can be approved. Please do them, and we'll approve the reduction. It's highly unusual and frankly not always legally supportable that arbitrary changes are made in the bonding amounts. Either both the developer and the municipality need to be concerned about this, because there is a process of significant scrutiny that goes through the engineer. I mean, the engineer is our friend. If the engineer doesn't believe something should be done, the board should heed it. Not the board, the governing body should heed it. And there may be instances where, in fact, the applicant has done its work, and the board, the governing body may feel reluctant or suspicious. Well, in that situation, it's not always such a good idea to not approve it. I mean, if the applicant has done the job, they should be allowed to get a reduction. But if no work has been done, you can't just take a meat cleaver and say, we're cutting this amount off a bond or something like that. That's really, it really is highly legally questionable. And so what you have in a situation such as this is that we presume, because the engineer is sworn to do this, that it will review in good faith all the aspects of the development and make the changes in the bond and direct the reductions in the bond if in his professional opinion, they're warranted. In some instances, the engineer may consult with the planner or with the attorney saying, here's the situation, this is what I think. Sometimes, you'll need the assistance of legal counsel. But that's how the process works. And eventually, as I said a minute ago, eventually when all the improvements are done, the bond is essentially fully released and extinguished, and at that point, the contract that the bond signifies is closed. I mean, that in a nutshell is how it works.
In Somerville, the unit prices for the county are used to keep it.
Right.
So the county comes out with unit prices every couple of years from their bonding experience. So there's 4 or 5 pages to the extent possible. Those are given to the applicant to use as unit prices. And then the reduction can't be more than 70%. So typically the reduce, so the recommendation goes to Kevin. So Kevin's familiar with the letters I write.
Yep.
For both boards to reduce or eliminate the bond upon subsequent. So
Right.
that's the process we follow. The borough follows, basically uses Somerset County unit prices. And so it takes all that out of it. The applicant writes it, we review it. And they can submit a letter of credit,
Yep.
cash, or a performance.
Well, exactly. That's
you
kind
can
of
do a letter
where
of
we get
credit.
involved, because sometimes bonds aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Ideally, cash is king, as we all know, but if you've got a reputable organization that uses a reputable bonding company, and there are quite a few in this state, you're generally all right. Mike is correct, of course, in connection with the unit prices. I was just trying to think, I'm trying to give you kind of the thumbnail. I teach the course I've taught the course for Rutgers for many years, and so I'm trying to distill what I teach to planners and engineers into a short presentation, but that's kind of how it works.
The Cox books gives you a template of the language the bond should
Right.
have. I typically look at the language. If the language doesn't meet the template, it goes to Cliff.
Well,
for
we just went
review
through
and
this
comment,
with one
right,
developer. We simply could not get them to do,
Right.
and I kept disapproving the bond. Not that I'm happy about it, but the reality is that in that situation, if the bond isn't proper as to form and content, I always talk about form and content. If it's not proper, and I mean, I've had more than one. I remember one general counsel, I won't mention the name, for a bonding company that's defunct now, used to specialize in doing these little things, and they would get sued, and he would be able to say, well, the bond is defective. I mean, and what that means in English is that the municipal attorney possibly, or the engineer may not have given it the scrutiny it needed. And sometimes that's what happens, and that's a bad situation.
How does it affect you, Ed?
Pardon me?
That does affect me.
Yeah, in your job.
Sorry about that, Mike.
My side,
I'll get it.
I don't deal with it at all.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Oh, you did.
No, that, engineering, sometimes we go for COs in the middle of winter, the improvements of shrubs and grasses. They can't plant in winter, so they'll post a bond.
Right.
So they come
Yeah.
back in the spring and plant. So we have to hold up a CO for that.
So
I-
end of the civics lesson for tonight.
I
Yeah,
mean, exactly. I mean, next time, when you want to talk about the maintenance bond, we can discuss that in a separate discussion.
Yeah, what goes with the bond sometimes, and it gets involved in this, is items that have to be addressed prior to issuance of a construction permit. And the reason being that Ed knows so much more than I do, and the UCC code says that if it's in a construction, and the developer asks for a TCO, if it's not a public safety issue, you can't hold it up. So if there's money owed or something's not right, you can't hold up issuing a TCO. So that's a big issue.
There's a lot of prior approvals they have to meet. If they can't meet the prior approvals, then they post a bond.
Right, so we need to, when I say we need to, typically, there's a lot of connection fees and stuff that has to be done first, because if you let the horse out of the barn, you can't get it, you can't hold a TCO hostage for fees and other improvements
Right.
that, you can hold a CO, but.
Not the TCO.
Not the TCO, and then you have the whole issue of issuing a TCO, we could go for months or years. And then you have the whole issue, how do you get from a TCO to a CO? And it's just, it's like, that's another issue
That's
that's,
another lesson.
It
Yeah.
can be a dreadful
Right.
experience, I
that
can
no one
I
wants to
can say
deal
that
with. because
firsthand.
if the building's being occupied and you have tenants in it, it's the last thing you wanna do. So it's very important that these prior approvals, bonding, guarantees get done properly up front, because it's very difficult to get it on the back end. Very, very difficult.
Very helpful.
Take 0.2 CUs out of petty cash.
That's right.
Warming up for the League of Municipalities. And next semester for Rutgers.
I know that the council and the planning board have discussed the ordinance, the parking on 6 West Cliff Street.
Oh, yes.
I know the planning board's been looking at it, the council looked at.
Council, I think, signed off on it per
Yeah.
with
The
Kevin.
ordinance passed.
The ordinance passed, so that's that's not an issue, that's been done. That's the 2 spaces in front of the Cliff Street that,
Yep.
where the driveway was going.
Yeah.
There was something about whether it's striped, not striped, whether it's been maintained, because you're gonna lose a couple of spaces if they're striped. Then Kevin, let me know, I think it was last week, that was through.
Yeah.
One of the silver linings of having Kevin in the office is he lets me know what's going on with council. Right?
One of the silver linings.
No, one of the silver linings, right?
And just, I just want you to come out and support your veterans on Sunday. Post 12 we'll be having a semi-annual breakfast buffet, $15, starts at 8 in the morning till noon, and you can't beat it. It's all you can eat, including takeout. All you can eat? Okay, Chris. Most people can eat.
Well,
Bring a couple of football players.
Oh, yes, well, we have a 10-foot screen that the game will be on.
Yep.
Along with the other 7 TVs. Okay, so I'm gonna get in trouble for that, but that's okay.
What date are we meeting in November?
The first,
the 4th,
I mean, the first,
Yeah.
first Wednesday.
We already.
first Wednesday in November, the first Wednesday in December.
So November 4th and December 4th.
I do believe it's both 4ths. I'll check that right now.
But I'm always happy to, give a summary, as much of a thumbnail as I can provide, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure.
Excuse me, it's the 6th. It's November
November
6th
6th.
is the first Wednesday,
Of November, yeah.
Day
and
after
it's the
election.
4th on December. December 4th, November 6th.
Okay,
That's the
anything
first
else
Wednesday.
Come before the board?
Oh, Roberta, you will not be at the next meeting?
No, it conflicts with the Somerset County
Okay.
Library Commission.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, we'll do that.
In front of the board on November is the Veterans Memorial Drive application. So we have one application on November, and then we have Bell on December.
Okay.
There's an application for a house on the west side of Vets, heading
So-
towards East Main Street.
That's November.
That's 106 Veterans, Mike?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so it's 106
106.
Veterans. It's currently not occupied. It's a home that the municipality actually owned and auctioned off a couple of years ago.
Right next to the steel fabricators. Okay,
106.
yeah.
And that's on for November?
106 Franklin Street.
That's up for November.
Okay, good. Just
Yes.
Any other business to come before the board? Someone like to move for adjournment? Move.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?